So welcome, Khari Arnold, the founder of Library Dads, to the Reading Inspires podcast. I first heard about Khari through an article that I read, and then I knew that I had to reach out to him with my coworker, Katie Nicholson. We hit it off, and he's joining us today on the podcast. First, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear what was the spark behind the Library Dads? What inspired you? Was there a particular moment or experience with your daughter that made you realize that this could become something much larger than just your personal reading routine?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. I'm so glad that we're able to have this time together and that have the platform to speak, on a great platform like Reading Inspires. It's definitely inspired me and happy to touch on that. But yeah, to answer your question, the Library Dads started June 2024 was when I officially launched the Instagram page, and it was the same day the idea came to me. But I would backtrack a year prior to June 2023. That's when I took my daughter to the library for the first time. She was 4 months old, and I was inspired to do that primarily from a book that I read. It's called The Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. And so when she was 4 months old, started this challenge where I said, all right, every week, once a week, we're going to go to the library. I want to do that at least a year straight, right? And so we did that. And after a year went by, I wanted to kind of create some type of recap, right? Just I knew I took some videos and some pictures of us going to all these different libraries across Atlanta. And in that moment, as I was trying to gather content, um, it came to me that this would be bigger than this should be bigger than just my daughter and me. And so that's when the idea came to me, and I told a few dad friends that I knew, and we had our first what we call a library link up, where it's a bunch of dads getting together with their kids to engage in our three pillars: bonding, books, and brotherhood. We started off with, I want to say, 7, 8 dads, including mine, that first event, and a year later we had um, about 100 dads at our 1 year anniversary celebration. And we've reached a lot more over the year plus since we've started. So yeah, it's that's how it started, and I'm excited to see where it's going.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that book, The Read Aloud Handbook. I have to say, you've mentioned that before, and I bought a copy as soon as I heard you mention that. So we'll definitely include links in the show notes for anybody else who wants a copy of that book too. But I think what you got from that was setting up this reading routine, and I can certainly relate to that. I will never forget bringing my daughter home from the hospital, my oldest daughter. I have three children, and reading the first book with her. And from that moment on, knowing that this was going to be a very special bond for us, a part of her childhood and my parenthood. You talked about that too, and these three pillars: bonding, books, and brotherhood. How did you decide on those three pillars, and how do you bring those to life in your work?
Yeah, and it's in order too. I think the way we should engage when it comes to reading with our kids should be through bonding, like seeing it as a way to spend quality, uninterrupted, active time with them, right? You're going to want to do it more when you have it from that mentality. And so, like, when I talk about that challenge of my daughter not going every week, um, it wasn't the books per se that brought me back every single week. It was that bonding time. And we use the books to do that bond, engage in that bonding practice. And I really needed that. I think it was smart to make that the first pillar so dads never lose sight of that, especially new dads. Like I said, she was 4 months. And it's really not many ways to bond with a 4 month old, particularly as a dad. And so I'm watching, mom do the feeding. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna do the reading. Like that's gonna be our way to bond. I can't do, the same thing she does, at least not in that same method. I had to have a bottle, right? But I said, no, we're gonna get some books in this house. We're gonna read every day. But then I also really realized getting out the house was just super key. And that was a huge impetus too for us going to the library. We needed to get out the house, and to do that every single weekend, for free, and something that uh, aligns with her age range. It was the library, and it just really helped build our bond. Right. The books, I mean, it speaks for itself. I grew up around literacy, studied journalism in school, and built a career out of that. And so I knew that I was going to engage in books with her. And I did not know about the cognitive benefits reading to her would do at such a young age. That's something I learned in that Read Aloud Handbook. And so seeing that was just a plus, right? So that's the second pillar. And then thirdly, the brotherhood is something something I didn't really have um, entering fatherhood. Like, yeah, I had some friends who, had dads here and there, but there wasn't a space that was tailored for us to get together, right? And so having that, seeing or not having that, and then seeing not many dads at the library story times that I take my daughter to, like on Wednesdays at one of my local libraries. It'd be a really nice story time, man. Wouldn't see too many dads there, so how can I talk to more dads about this experience and connect and maybe share, some of the struggles and to someone who could relate to me, right? And so that became a huge pillar. That's what we built. It's not just a space for the dads to build a bond with their kid and to read a book with their kid, but also a space to connect with other fathers who can relate to the journey that they're on. It's therapeutic. Having someone that understands you allows you to feel seen and heard.
Yeah, I can appreciate that a lot. The idea that bonding for fathers looks different, especially in those early days, right, than a mother. And I will point out that book that I mentioned that was the first book we read my daughter when she came home. It was actually her dad who read that to her. So very relatable. I want to pull a little bit on that thread of brotherhood. How have you seen fathers in your program support each other? And was there anything that surprised you about that dynamic?
Surprised. I'm surprised that there's a guy. He's one of the volunteers, and his name is AJ. We were just talking casually, and he was telling me about how he just he went to a baseball game with one of the library dads he met, and he just said it so casual. I'm like, AJ, this is the type of stuff I like. I kind of want to know. Like, I need to be able to document this. Like, what led to that? And so we need to be able to start tracking some of these stories because I love seeing the connections being made. Phone numbers being exchanged, dads just laughing, talking, whatever the case may be. I know I've met a dad at an event, and that same day we went out to the park with the kids because our events from 10:30 to 12. It's like, all right, what next? We got the rest of the day, at the nap time. And so that's been fun. But yeah, I think too, just seeing dads be able to get out of a rut that they may be in. So, for instance, we have a dad on the team who said he was dealing with about a depression last December, and was scrolling on TikTok and found our group and said, "Wow, this is what I need, where I need to be." And he pulled up that very next event. He's been at practically all of them since, and like I said, he's on the team now. He's one of our major assets, and so yeah, I think those type of stories, because if he went to uh like a mom group with his wife and just tagged along, it wouldn't have been the same. but when he's around people who are essentially in the same seat that he's in, um, you're able to, feel a little more free. Mel Robbins talked about this in her book, The Let Them Theory, that came out earlier this year. She said there's the two of the greatest components when it comes to building friendships and relationships are proximity and timing. And so, proximity meaning people who are physically near you. My friend that I was referring to, he's from St. Louis. He didn't have too many friends physically, near him. And then, in terms of timing, that refers to people who are in the same chapter of life that you're in. And so, having dads who have babies, who have toddlers, who have elementary school age kids, you name it, it allows you to connect with people in that same proximity and in that same era, that same timing, if you will, that you're going through. So that's that's probably been the best part for the brotherhood.
Yeah. I can also share that feeling of, you want to spend time either before the nap or after the nap, of course, because we're still on the nap schedule, with other parents. And it also helps normalize some of, like you're describing, the stages of life that they're going through. It's very helpful to be around other parents that are going through the same things that you're going through with your children. It's
Sure.
so helpful. It's a community. So we talked about the importance for parents, for us to be in community. What about for the children? What have you seen, and why is it important for children to see their fathers leading in these spaces like story time?
Yeah, I think, of course, the social and emotional development is really good for our kids. I know we've had some dads pull up who are engaging in homeschooling. So this allows their kids to be around other kids. In terms of seeing the dads reading, I think that's very paramount because our kids need to see men valuing education, especially our boys who want to model what we do. And so if they don't see us modeling and valuing reading, what cue will exist for them to want to do that later in life, right? So for me, I saw my dad reading newspapers growing up. That was his form of literature. Um, I'm not sure my daughter will grow up knowing what a newspaper is, by the time she's in elementary. She all she knows is books. But that was his form of literature, and I saw him reading it. He would get the USA Today sent to the house every single uh, every single day, in the AJC every single Sunday. And I remember watching him engage with it, and it made me want to engage with it. And I ended up interning for USA Today when I got to college, and wanted to kind of build a career off of that. And I really give my dad credit because it was that exposure, right? Like I was being exposed unintentionally, to him reading and seeing him value that. So I'm like, okay, that's something I need to do. But I'm just concerned if our boys specifically, only see us value sports and not books, then that'll be the main thing that they want to. I should say the main thing, but the only thing that they would tether your excitement to, if that's the only thing you're really getting hype over and value, and you know what I mean. So, and I'm not a if or, I'm both and. So I've worked for the sports industry over 10 years. It's definitely a huge fan of sports, but at the same time, I want my kids to know reading is going to take you places. It's the number one predictor for academic success, and we're going to value that in this house.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you said you can do both, right? You can be a reader and play sports. You can read about sports. one of my favorite reading specialists that I worked with, we had a student who was like, "Well, I don't want to read. I'm going to be a baseball player." And she said to him, "Well, if you're going to be a big baseball player, you better be able to read that contract that they're giving you." So, reading is part of everything. And, I appreciate everything that you're saying about being a role model as a father. My greatest reading role model was my father who read to me every night, even though it was difficult for him. My dad has dyslexia. I've shared this on other interviews that I've done. And reading is challenging for him, especially the books that I picked when I was a kid, which were Dr. Seuss. They have a lot of nonsense words, which is difficult to read if you have dyslexia. But watching him persevere through those books because he knew that they brought me joy, taught me a lot. And so I, relate to a lot of what you're saying. And, I mentioned my favorite books were Dr. Seuss books. I'm sure everyone wants to know, what do you read with your daughter? Are there any particular authors, illustrators, stories that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean it changes so often. I mean I say each year she'll be 3 soon. But um it's been fun to see her gravitate towards, different favorites, if you will. I would say in this season, Jane Yolen's um, How Does a Dinosaur series, or How Does a
Oh,
Dinosaur
yeah.
Read? How Does a Dinosaur Go to School? How Does a Dinosaur, um, Say I'm Mad? It's so many of them. And she loves them all. She loves them all. It's rich in great imagery. It's rich in great text for her age. You got that rhyming component. So she's really big on that. I would also say, from an interactive book standpoint, she really loves Camila Reed's Peekaboo series. And I always recommend that book to parents who are looking for ways to keep their child busy, perhaps in the back seat or even at a restaurant. Like she probably has like a dozen books in this series, and my daughter has most of them. And so when she's in the back seat, and if she's getting a little antsy, she'll start interacting with these peekaboo books. Like it's not a lift the flap book. She has some of those too that she loves. There's a llama llama one particularly that she enjoys, but these are interactive in different ways. Kind of hard to explain, but it's an interactive book. And so she really likes those. And then one that I used to like growing up that she's really starting to get into, um, I Spy books. I thought we had, some more years before she would get into that. But no, even at 2, she's all about um, trying to find, I don't do the riddles with her just yet. I'll just say, I spy with my little eyes a rubber ducky, and you got all these objects on these 2 pages, and she's got to, you know, practice her visual skills to track down that mini rubber ducky. And so even when dads, I know you mentioned your dad having dyslexia, and there are other dads who aren't comfortable with reading for, other reasons, right? And it's books like these, though, that I think still help instill that desire for your child to want to read, want to pick up a book, engage in that bonding time that we talked about. Even if you don't think you're the strongest person to teach them how to read, understandable. But I don't think that should necessarily absolve us from teaching them to want to read, right? And so, like, I look at an I Spy book as a perfect example because I can spy um, a red hammer in the corner of this book. And now I can just tell her that she's got to find it. And, um, it leads to some laughs and everything. So, yeah, I think those 3 come to mind that she's really enjoying right now.
I appreciate you, and I'm sure our listeners who are parents appreciate this too, that you do not have to read every single word on the page. Take that burden off yourself. You do, especially with the little ones, 1, 2, 3 years old. You don't even have to read the pages in order because, as you mentioned, with at these ages, it's not about teaching them how to read. It's about developing their love for reading. So if they want to open a book and look at the same page and talk about the pictures and that's going to be it, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, one of the rules we teach our dads in our program is this. I call it the 80-20 rule, where when it comes to reading aloud, it's 80% how you bring the text to life and 20% the text itself. The text matters, but how you bring that text to life matters more. That's going to lead to them having um, more of a desire to want to do this again and see dad, mom, caregiver, whoever, bring a fun story to life, and the laughing. Like that's telling you that mattered so much to me. It still does, but in that phase when she was starting to smile and laugh, and seeing her do that with books as a baby and respond to me making these funny dog voices to one of the Amazing Love Every books. Oh my goodness, is something I'll never forget. Like I'll always cherish that. If I see that page of that particular book years later when she's an adult, I might break down crying because it's gonna take me back to that time whenever I turn to that page, she would just burst out just like laughing and hype and smiling and squealing, and then she would look at me in anticipation before we got to that page. And I'd even say, I'm trying to think of the name of this, Little Bitty Friends by Elizabeth McPink. The very last page of that book includes a dad hugging his daughter. And whenever we would get ready to turn to the end of that page, she'd be looking at me ready for a hug.
Oh, so sweet. And that's the bonding,
That's
right?
the bonding. Like, what you think that did to me? You know what I mean? Like, that did so much to me. And yeah, I got to see if she'll still do that, because we've read so many books since, but we read that one a lot, and she would just with anticipation, without fail, just look at me and give me a big hug.
And that's the other thing I always try to remind parents is if your child wants to read the same book over and over again, that's okay. I sometimes we might be getting a little tired of that book, but the time will pass. It'll pass by quickly. And then you will cherish the day that you read Llama Llama Red Pajama 3 times every day for a week, you know?
Absolutely.
So you're based in Atlanta right now. Can you talk a little bit about how you're growing and how can you keep that same sense of authenticity and intimacy as you expand?
Yeah. Authenticity. I'm really big on trying to protect the space. Um, we believe in partnerships, of course. But I know there are times where I think our biggest request has been from authors, wanting to come in and, share their book. And so we want to at some point create some type of space where they can all do that in one setting, because it would just be too much if every single week we're, bringing on a new author to promote their book when we have, a set curriculum, if you will. So like one day we will be reading about colors, if you will, and that might include Mickey Mouse Colors book, the Brown Bear, Brown Bear. Then we might have an agenda about farm animals, and now we're reading, Little Blue Truck, um, and so forth, right? Shapes, or I don't know if we have a shapes one. We have a fatherhood one where it's about books about dads reading to their kids or bonding with their kids, animals, whatever. And so we like to kind of repeat those. So I'm really just big on improving and enhancing what we do, but also realizing, all right, the dads are really liking this, so let's not try to reinvent the wheel too much. Our pillars are bonding, books, and brotherhood, so our program needs to follow that model. Like the first 30 minutes, we're engaging in bonding activities, some STEM toys. Um, the next 30 are the story time. And then the following 30, we're engaging in that brotherhood um, time where dads are talking while kids are playing with bubbles and, some of the other toys that we'll bring out. So it's just, I think, protecting what works, adding to it, realizing like, are some dads need, I think not some dads, all dads need something that's just for them, like where the kids aren't, in that same room. So we have had spaces like that where the dads will go out bowling, will, uh, engage in some other fun activities. I'm thinking of one specific. It's called foaling, where it's like bowling, but we would throw footballs at the bowling pins. So we've done stuff like that. We're about to start some workshops up. We've had one where we partner with Fulton County Schools, and they were able to teach their kids about, or teach the dads about phonological awareness and how to engage with their kids from a reading standpoint and sound syllables. um, I would say though we want to expand that from just talking about the kids. We want to talk about how the dads are navigating stress, how the dads are navigating burnout, how the dads are navigating balance, um, teaching them maybe and equipping them with some financial literacy tools, right? So there are a few things that we want to implement next year from a workshop standpoint. Um, And then, yeah, I think our next big thing is our tour. Haven't really told all the dads yet. We'll be announcing it soon, but we've only operated in Fulton County, which is the county Atlanta is in, but there are neighboring counties that has a huge population. So you got DeKalb, you got Gwinnett, you got Cobb, you got Clayton. Um, and a few others, but we're definitely going to engage in more counties than just Fulton. So we'll be able to expand and reach, dads everywhere. You want to make it convenient for them, like I was going to libraries that were a little further out sometimes, mainly because she would nap in the car. So that's buying me some, some time and buying her some time. But, everybody doesn't deal with that, right? Like some people just want to go to something that's a little more closer. So we're going to try and meet them where they are.
That's awesome. And so if there are dads out there, listening to this that don't live in the Atlanta area but want to start something similar, what's your advice for them?
Yeah, I've seen a few start that I was just talking to a friend about this today, somebody on the team, and how I kind of want to gather some of the groups I've seen up and do a shout out to them. Um, One specifically in St. Louis started called DADS, and that acronym stands for Dads Actively Doing Story Time.
Hmm,
And yeah, they were able to talk to their local library and brought on some dads to attend. So yeah, encouraging your local library to have some type of program, a daddy and me program. There are so many groups and things for moms, but again, we need to make sure dads aren't just supported for themselves, but also can be included in their child's educational infrastructure, and not just seeing that as something moms do. Because when you think about it, from the time they're infants, majority of the teachers that they're seeing in media on these YouTube channels, right? It's mostly women. If you're engaging in YouTube and you subscribe to Miss Rachel or Miss Houston, Miss Tasha, um, there are a couple men YouTube channels, but a lot of them they're a little more about energy, and some of it is very overstimulated, if I might ask.
hmm,
But um, I think having males being seen at that age is so important because a child's brain is being formed. I think 90% of it is being developed from age 0 to 5, right?
hmm.
So that's before they get to school. Then they get to school and they already have that brain kind of formed associating education with women, and now they get in the school system, and 75% of the teachers are women. So at what point, you know what I mean, will they be able to associate dads, men, with this critical task? Like we have not, and we don't even have to go there, but we have not talked about this being a crisis that we're in right now, a literacy crisis. And it's going to take more than just one gender to address it. And so, yeah, I'll say that.
Absolutely. And, there's tons of research on mothers reading aloud to their children, and teachers, as you pointed out, are also many times women. But there is research now. This is a study that came out of Murdoch Children's Research Institute, which is based in Australia, but I think we can learn a lot from the results that fathers doing story time, reading aloud to their kids, resulted in a 40% increase in children's vocabulary. So I think, there's a lot that we can learn just from that study and on the importance of
Great study.
fathers. Yeah,
Yep, I'm familiar with that one. Um, and there's another one that was based out, I want to say London. And it tracked how many dads are actually reading to their kids daily. And that number was 47%. And so that just tells me like, half of these dads are missing the opportunity to do what you just said.
absolutely.
You know?
And I mean, unfortunately, it's everyone right now. The next generation. I'm a millennial parent myself. I often say that. But Gen Z parents, a
Oh yeah.
HarperCollins study found only 41% read aloud to their children daily. So even less than the fathers in the study
Yes.
that you were just mentioning.
Oh, that's a really good point. In terms of the Gen Z generation, I read that. Um, and at what point will it reverse in a positive way? Because I think we're in a time where reading proficiency is not just at an all-time low, but reaching potential is being hindered by tech. And so if we're going to continue, it's not about turning to an anti-tech, anti-AI conversation. This is just gonna, I just want to talk about reality right now, right? Um, when creativity is being stifled, when critical thinking is being stifled, when problem solving is being stifled, when empathy is continuing to decline, we need to promote the one thing that we know can build that skill. So if I'm reading a book to my child and I ask questions like, what just happened? I'm building his or her comprehension. I ask questions like, well, why do you think they did that? Now we're practicing critical thinking. And what would you do if that were you? Now we're engaging in problem solving. Well, how did that make you feel? Now we're tapping into emotional intelligence. These are skills we're going to have to really embrace. I don't know, nobody knows what the future is going to hold in terms of the job market, right? What we do know is there's going to be a huge reliance on a portfolio of skills. And you have to do the thing that can help build those skills, right? And so that's kind of what I'm concerned about, is people focusing too much on, are they good at technology? Like, can a 3-year-old manage an iPad and
Hmm.
know how to swipe left and right? I think that 3-year-old may have just adopted to what they have seen. I don't think that means that I'll go on for days. I think I made the point, right?
I, I am so with you, Kari, and you kind of hinted at it earlier. You brought it up. When you're going on a car ride, why not have a book in the car for
Yeah.
your child? When you are at a restaurant waiting for your food, why not have a book? And this is my personal opinion, but too many times I see kids with that are just given devices when there is passive time, waiting at the dentist's office, riding in the car. sitting at a restaurant. And all of those are opportunities to read or engage in conversation or storytelling.
And let me just, it's hard. Like parenting, you have three. Like you have three. So I have one and I'm like, yo, it's hard. I have those moments where I'm driving and I've thought, so just transparency, my daughter doesn't, she doesn't really know what an iPad really is. Like she may have seen mine, um, but she's never had one in the back seat. But I've had moments when I'm driving and I'm like, oh yeah, this would be a moment right here where if she was a tablet baby, I would throw that thing back there so fast. It's hard. So I really don't even condemn, parents at all who are just like tired and frustrated and, just want peace. Um, but when we signed up for this, we chose to like embrace these hard moments, right? That it's so challenging. And I'm gonna shout out this book one more time, the Read Aloud Handbook. I'm gonna need to get on their royalties the way I be promoting that book.
You got me to
Uh,
buy it, so
no, I actually met the author. The author passed away, but his son reached out after seeing us on the Today Show, and we met virtually through email. Really, really great family. Um, but there's a story in this book that talks about a family who would watch TV together over dinner, and just parents are doing their thing, kids are watching TV, and they're eating. They said they want to change that and they want to save TV for the weekends, right? And engage in reading, during the week and over dinner. The kids cried for 2 weeks straight over it. These are older kids, right? They cried for 2 weeks straight. By week four, I mean, by day four, I would have, been like, man, is this even going to work? Like, this is just a lot. Day eight, this is just too much. But eventually, as you start to associate reading with entertainment and not something that you're doing out of punishment. I'm not punishing you, during this dinner time. I'm showing you how this can actually be entertaining. We can laugh over this. We can build your imagination over this. And over time, you've kind of replaced that reliance on, these screens and devices and whatnot by providing something else that they didn't really realize is fun too.
absolutely. And some parents might be listening right now thinking, oh no, my child is already using their tablet every time we're in the car. Like, what do I do? Where do I start? I don't want my child to cry for 2 weeks straight, but maybe start small. Maybe just a couple times a week, replace looking at a tablet with telling a story or engaging in a conversation, reading a book. These are all things that build language and literacy.
Yeah. And um expect it to be tough, it's as you as you parent, especially, younger kids, you see tantrums, right? And we want to do whatever we can to avoid it, but expect that transformation period to be, somewhat challenging for you. But just have the patience and know that, all right, this will work and it will benefit them in the long run, right?
Mhm. That made me think of something because I'm always an advocate of let children be children and create spaces that are friendly to children. And children have tantrums sometimes, especially toddlers. They just do. What has your experience been in going to the library with children and parents and with little children? And we typically, some of us have memories of the library of having a mean old librarian saying shh all the time. Like, what is it like when you go with your group to the library?
Okay, yeah. So haven't had that. I was gonna mention in terms of my daughter specifically first, how I've seen her throw tantrums in the library. It doesn't It's not limited to, the house. um, It's yeah, it'll be outdoors, it'll be in the car. If she's throwing a tantrum in the library, when it's time to leave, because you know how transitions can be, right? But
Transitions.
yes, in terms of the library dad space, our link ups are typically held inside a meeting room, like a library meeting room. So it's off, so it's not like we're bothering other patrons. We will go into the children's section, but typically the libraries we prefer to go to have like the children's section off to the side, so it's not really gonna bother others in the adult section. So, uh, but I mean, even in today's age, you're not really getting. There may be some libraries where you're getting that, but for the most part, especially when you're with kids, it's pretty light on that front. And we've had times where during our story time inside the meeting room, uh, baby may start crying or something, or a toddler might. We're all dads, so we all understand. Like nobody's
Hmm.
looking around like who, like when you're on an airplane. No, we we understand, and we can tune it out and still pay attention. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the brotherhood too, right?
Yes.
Normalizing children's actions, behaviors for each other and being there for each other because you know how frustrating it can get when your child has a tantrum, but that's part of childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing strengthens your emotional intelligence um, and resolve than being able to monitor how you react in those moments.
So this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Kari. We always end with this question because the podcast is called Reading Inspires. So what does reading inspire for you?
That's a great question. I would say reading inspires you to reach your full potential. Yeah, it unlocks a version of you that you wouldn't have known existed. I didn't go out expecting to lead a community of, right now 700 families have been to the library dads events.
Incredible.
Yeah, I didn't venture out into that just on my own. It was a book that somewhat inspired that. And so when we have in total 700 dads and kids that have shown up and have expressed. I've heard many of them express what it's done for them, but I didn't get there until I saw what it did for me. And then you go even further is what another author, Jim Traley's, what he did, and he put that in a book. I read it, and now it unlocked a newer version of me, and a lot of others are going to be better for it if you start thinking about how you can apply some of these principles. I'm not just talking about the books about how to read to your kids, just anything, even fiction books. My wife's really into fiction books, and um, they spark your creativity. I haven't read one in a good minute. It's been about 6 years since I've read a full fiction book. But I remember reading that when I was like, okay, this actually um, got my mind spinning with just creativity, right? And so it just unlocks so much. That's how reading inspires.
Thank you, Kari. This has been inspiring, and I hope all the families and educators and literacy lovers that are listening to this felt inspired too. So thank you.